I was brutally abused sexually when I was between the age of 4 and 5. I was led like a lamb taken to slaughter to my neighbor's backyard where I was abused. Margaret, my neighbor's daughter, first offered me a sweet non-carbonated drink made with artificial flavors and invited me to play on their set of swings attached to a frame. I was enjoying myself, but I suddenly became confused when I was asked to take off my clothes and swing naked with my legs wide apart. That did not go too well with me, so I vehemently refused to do what I was being asked to do. I shook my head violently and kept saying no when they started beating me and threatening me with all sorts of derogatory words. I did not even understand what they were doing to me. At my tender age, I was not physically modest, so I just thought they were probably playing a bad joke with me. I became confused and also very angry at first. I could not specifically number the amount of people that were with us, but I'm certain that there was a matured man, some guys from high school, several young boys, and me. Then there was also Johnny, my little next door friend. He was in the swing set next to me. Johnny had been suffering from mild disability. He was a year younger than me. Due to his medical condition, his contact with the outside was restricted, and so he could only play outside if he was with me. Johnny's mother discussed with my mother, and they both thought it wise to make me Johnny's little caregiver, and so we played together a lot. We even became best friends because we practically spent most of our time together knowing his medical condition. I always try to protect him like a mother and protects her chicks from hawks, and I even began to treat him like my younger brother, as much as my ability could permit. My heart skipped a bit when I turned my head to the right and found my beloved Johnny weeping uncontrollable. That was when it dawned on me that this was not merely a joke. My common sense alerted me that I was in serious danger. I felt sad because I have been given the task of protecting him. I felt terribly scared because I did not want anything bad to happen to him. Even till this moment, I still cannot truly explain the magnitude of hopelessness and fear I experienced when I just sat there, watched them hurt my friends, and I could do nothing to stop them and also help my friend. I think I must have lost consciousness at that moment because all my life I had kept remembering this event up until this point, until I have been since, hunted by the tears Johnny was shedding, and also his desperate cry for help. I must have forgotten how much Johnny suffered, or even how his suffering made me scared and also horrified me. I don't remember how I got out of the swing. It could be that I fell over, maybe someone pushed me off the swing, but I do recall flashes of things that happened afterwards. I remembered hearing myself screaming horribly. I was trashing my arms and legs wildly. Suddenly, strong hands covered my mouth, trying to silence me. I was hearing voices shouting at me, telling me that I was a bad girl and that I should keep quiet. I had this feeling that I was going to die because hands were around my throat. I felt horrible, discomforted because of the pressure on my head. I did not want to die. So I tried very hard to hold on. I did not even know that I was trying to avoid strangulation. I just kept trying hard not to succumb to the horrible pressure I was feeling in my head. A pressure that was a constant reminder of the fact that I had been doomed. I don't know why, but I just felt at this moment that I could not fight the pressure anymore. And so I quietly slipped out into dark oblivion. Then I realized I was falling fast. I could see stars all around me, but they were also far from me. I was falling heads over heels through endless space continuously, and the only feeling I felt was horrible. I know that terrible things happened to me. During this near-death experience, I was brutally raped by more than one matured man. And older boys, plus I was even made to engage in sexual acts with other children while others were watching us. Up until this moment, I'm still being plagued by the irritating memory of the smell of the sweat of one of our neighbor's little son, even though I cannot remember what we did. Occasionally I get flashbacks of memories of what transpired that day, but I try all my possible best not to think about it. I determined not to think about it. This was when I saw him. I cannot say I was an expert of Jesus, but I knew it was him. I had no doubt whatsoever because of the unexplainable joy I felt when I met him. He lovingly communicated that I did not have to keep falling. He then told me that I could fly if I wanted to. He communicated that I could move my arms in a certain way and fly. There he was standing majestically on top of a platform outside of a place. I took a quick glance and I felt as if I was standing on some unearthly planet. I cannot explain if it was solid Earth-like place or some sort of vehicle. It could have been a floating space. No, I do not want to describe it as spaceship because my experience was in no way related to any unidentified flying object or any other similar phenomenon. Truly, it was definitely Jesus who met me. I desperately wanted to describe him as an alien, because he was definitely not someone living on planet Earth, but then he was in no way associated with the popular ideas about aliens. He then invited me to a place which seemed like the moon. He then took me inside an entryway-like place and shut a door I had not noticed. We found ourselves in a large room that was filled with many people who were happy with themselves. There was unexplainable joy in the gathering that I had never experienced before. Although I knew this kind of joy existed, but I had never been given the opportunity to experience it until this moment. I wished I could stay in that room forever, but then we had to move to a hall that seemed like a corridor. Despite how I tried to strain my vision, I was still not able to see the end of the corridor. It immediately felt as if the corridor disappeared into the distance. The structural design of the place was beyond perfection, but I cannot recall many of the outlines of the corridor. On both sides of the long corridor, I saw doorways installed in a long sequence. I was then made to understand that each door led to an accumulation of knowledge and the pure essence of a specific type of earthly things. For instance, a door led to the knowledge of plants and growing things. Another entryway led to the knowledge of minerals. I realized that Jesus cherished each of the person there, and they were all considered as priceless by Jesus, even for who they were. These were not the famous mighty men on earth, but just simple everyday people. The most important thing I got to understand was that each person loved every other person, even the children and adults, alike as much as Jesus did. They knew themselves and also valued themselves because they considered themselves to be one. Each person was applauded for what they were. Jesus showed me one little boy who playfully wiggled his ears and earned enormous cheers and hand claps, as if he had won a marathon race. All these were done to show me where true value lay. I learned that true value does not lie in a person's accomplishment, but rather in the person. It seemed like we spent forever time in that large room filled with joyful people. I felt like we were already drowning in an ocean of love and value. I was also included, and I began to bask in the euphoria of their joint respect and love. I felt Jesus communicating to me, reminding me how splendid all of these were. I felt him said something like, "This is really excellent, or is it not?" I replied, "Yes, it was. Who would not think this scenario was pretty great?" In fact, only the joy that radiates amongst the people that were gathered there was more than enough to make one feel ecstatic. Suddenly, Jesus shifted my attention to planet Earth. He pointed inside my classroom and showed me a particular row of desks which some little schoolboys occupied frequently. Jesus started explaining to me how, due to their inability to perform well in school, they usually feel very unhappy and sad. This made me remember an event that happened in my school. My teacher gave my class something to do. I did my very best, but I was very surprised when I was scolded by my class teacher for doing so well that I even made those boys feel so inferior and useless. I felt angry because the same teacher repeatedly asked us to do our best. So why was I being scolded now for doing my best? After showing me these pitiful little boys, Jesus questioned me if I would be willing to go back to earth so I could help these boys rebuild their low self-esteem and also make them realize the truth about how important they really were. He wanted me to also let them know that even if they did not do well in their academics, they are still loved and cherished. I didn't know when I shouted yes and told Jesus that I would like to return back to earth to tell the boys that they are much loved and cherished. If you ask me, I would never be able to explain what transpired. The only thing I can tell you is that the next moment I found myself standing in our neighbor's kitchen. Thankfully, their mother had returned. I don't know how, but I was standing in front of her. She looked at me and asked me why I did what I did. I was confused because I did not understand her questions. I repeated the question in my mind, not sure of what she meant exactly. So I just answered and told her that I did it because her daughter threatened to beat me up if I refused to do what she asked me to do. I just concluded that maybe she was asking me why I removed my clothes. The expression on her face changed instantly, and she suddenly looked fearful and reserved. She sighed deeply and asked to enter their bathroom and put on my clothes. I don't think I will be able to forget the disgusting odor I perceived while I was in there. It seemed as if they do not even take proper care of their toilet because the smell on the toilet was obscene and very offensive. I hurriedly put on my clothing so I could leave there. When I came outside, I was surprised to see my mother already waiting for me. I felt very relieved to see my mother. I immediately went and held her, and we left their house. I do not know what Margaret Mother already told my mother before I came out of the bathroom. and I didn't care at all. I just held my mother's hand tightly and told her that they told me that I was unpleasant. My mother lovingly looked at me and told me that I was not bad and that what had happened was not my fault. So the joy I felt at hearing my mother's reassuring words was unexplainable. And I definitely believed her words to the extent that I felt no iota of guilt concerning what happened to me that day. We went home that day, and what happened that day was buried. My mother did not ask me what happened, and I did not care to tell her what happened that day. I had already decided to tell Johnny of my encounter with Jesus, but every time I kept telling my mother that I wanted to talk to Johnny, she would always come up with an excuse like, wait until tomorrow. Eventually, she told me that Johnny's family had already relocated to another vicinity. I was sad because I really wanted to tell Johnny how special he was. I wanted to make him realize that he was loved and much valuable despite his mild disability. Even till this day, I still have not been able to let Johnny know that he is cherished because I have not seen him till today. After the occurrence, my mother took me to see a doctor and the experience of my perversion was discussed. I did not really talk about what had happened to me. Her major concern was the message that had been given to me by Jesus. On my way home, I enthusiastically told my mother that I would like to be a tutor so that I would be able to tell my students and friends how much cherished they are. I wanted to let them know that they were God's own treasure. My mom smiled, encouraged me even before she told me that she is certain I would become an excellent teacher. I was very happy, and I smiled happily with the conviction that I would be able to resume school as a teacher. I was just thinking that all the stuff we were being taught in school were meaningless and not as relevant as what I had to tell them. I felt that they all knew what happened to me, and so they would be eager to hear about my experience with Jesus. My mother could not help laughing as she told me that I would not be able to become a teacher until after I must have been done with school. I felt bad because I was thinking that I would resume school as a teacher and not as a student. I then asked my mom to summarize how much longer I still had to spend in high school. And I was disappointed when she told me that I had to spend more than 12 years before I could become a teacher. I made her explain why I had to spend 12 more years in school. And she told me that I had to finish high school first. I felt bad because I felt 12 years was just too long for me to wait before I told them of my experience in heaven. I sat hopelessly in my mom's car just thinking that I had failed in my mission. My 5-year-old subconsciousness told me that I was being deprived from telling others about my trip to heaven. When I think about it, I realize that my mother may not have been aware of my near-death experience. It is unimaginable thinking of the fact that a child could be molested in their neighborhood without her parent ever finding out about it. Or maybe my mother knows about it, but just did not feel like talking about it because it was potentially shaming and highly embarrassing. I was not bothered that my mother did not ask me. And I did not tell her because I obviously did not know how to say what had happened to me. Many things happened to me, but unfortunately for me, my cousin witnessed what had happened to me that day, and he began to use it to threaten me whenever he wants to molest me. This cousin was staying with us because he was in serious trouble with the authorities. And so my parent pitied him and allowed him to live with us. I stopped fighting with him and I allowed him to do whatever he wanted to do with my body while I quietly slipped to dark oblivion. I did not realize that I had the ability to transcend this world, so I would not feel the pains he was putting me through. I even learned how to control my movement. I even think I became capable of flying. I became reminded of this unpleasant ordeal when the cousin who had been molesting me died in the year 2019. I had already begun to forget what he made me to go through until after his death. This uncle has been arrested times without numbers. He has been charged with theft. He had been accused of showing pornographic materials to even kids. Of course, I had no doubt that he did all this stuff because of what he also did to me. My NDE has taught me a great lesson. I keep thinking if I still remain the same person I was before that experience, what would have been my fate if I had not gone through that experience? How would I have been able to survive if Jesus had not encountered me? Well, I do not want to know the answer of my last question. I forever remain grateful that Jesus helped me to overcome my near-death experience.